What is up, Generals? We are back with Ultimate General Civil War, and this is the JNP Rebalance Mod Legendary CSA campaign, and we're looking at the army before the skirmish at Ambush Convoy. So we've expanded from 1st, 2nd, and 3rd infantry. 1st and 2nd both have been upgraded to Harper's Ferries, utilizing perk points. We've created 4th, 5th, 6th, and 7th infantry using the guns we have left over. So most of that's 1841s. However, in the case of 6th and 4th, it is Springfield 1855s. Now, this is a weapon that I'm going to replace at the earliest possible convenience. And the reason I say that is while the weapon has a pretty decent damage curve and excellent rate of fire, especially for an infantry long arm, it suffers pretty significantly at long range with an accuracy curve that is identical to that of the percussion musket. Now, it is 100 units of range longer that it shoots, so that's not a 100% fair comparison. I do acknowledge that. But I personally feel as if the 20% accuracy debuff warrants me not using this weapon any longer than I absolutely have to. Additionally, it doesn't have a very high melee stat, so like initially my thought process was like, oh, this is obviously the melee gun. It's not, though. Like, it just doesn't do anything. Its fire rate is fast, but it's not like it's the end of the world faster. 125 versus 100 is noticeable, but it's not, game-breakingly so or anything. We have a decent pool of officers thanks to First Bull Run. And take a look at the career screen so we know what's going on. So Econ Training, Army Org are all at 4. Logistics and Recon hanging on to 2. Between now and Shiloh, I need to get AO up to 6, which means that there are 2 skirmish side battles, whatever, between now and Shiloh, and I think that both of them are going to have to be put into AO to level me up. So that is a big problem for the Army. The reason I say that is that while I may have the unit slots to bring all 24 possible units to that battle, I may not have the weapons to equip them or the money to buy them. So that is one of the cons of, my high training early start. One of the pros, however, is that 7th Infantry is a brand new unit with a sufficiently leveled major was still able to get a perked infantry unit here out of them. So, I'm probably not going to go higher than 4 training for a significant portion of the campaign because I can get away with, I can't use like a brand new major or like a captain to make a 1-star unit yet, but this bodes very well. And then that means that I can put the rest of these perks into log and recon and whatnot and get them up to 4, or maybe I can go like balls deep on economy or something. So there's a couple of different ways I can take the stats, but the next 2 points have to go into AO. And then honestly, I'm probably not going to touch that for a long time. AO6 gets me 25 unit brigades, and that's fine. Or not brigades, corps. And that's fine for me for the foreseeable future. So we have an interesting situation coming up with, let's just quickly, I created a Dragoon unit, created a 12-pound howitzer unit that I'm not super excited about, but they have the horse artillery perk. They're just going to kind of hang out with the infantry and do that thing. And then we've got a new light infantry unit as well. Now, interestingly, I didn't go with my all accuracy all the time build. So they have the speed and cover plus perk. The same thing with the scout. With the Dragoons, they have a speed perk. And the thought process there is that I'm intending to use the Dragoons especially as spotters for artillery as I begin to develop a counter battery capacity within my artillery branch. It's not there yet, really, because I'm just relying entirely on the ordnance guns to do long-range work, and they're not really optimized for the role. They're capable, but they're not optimized for it, in my personal estimation. And then the light infantry, there's a perk in the 2nd tier that gives them accuracy, and I think speed and cover is more important, right now, for the unit function, and that's also why they don't have scope Whitworths. Also, note, I don't have enough scope Whitworths. This is also one of the other negatives or cons associated with a high training opening is that you're very hard pressed to equip your army early on in a manner that may lead to lighter casualties than the ones that I'm going to suffer from an equipment level. Now, the performance of my dudes, I'm hoping will kind of make up for that, and that later on, as we begin to swim in more and more in guns, based on my experience on the tail end of the 1.24 playthrough, I was swimming in guns to the point where I wasn't buying them anymore. So hopefully that will bear out, and this strategy won't be like, that the opening won't tank my campaign before we get too far. Now, before I jump into the mission, it's been my experience that I can't keep up meaningful commentary during a legendary playthrough. There's too much going on. So that may change as we go later in the campaign. But I'm going to go ahead and turn the mic off, and then I'll do a post recording for audio commentary, and we'll also speed up the side battles. So with that being said, this is Fiasco for the moment signing off, and I'll see you guys at Ambush Convoy. Thanks. And we're back to day of commentary. So as we head into the battle, there is one modification from the camp screen you saw a second ago, and that is the creation of a new infantry unit, 8th Infantry in place of 1st Lightfoot. This particular skirmish was a battle that I had a hard time kind of nailing down. Legendary is a different beast entirely. So let's take a look at my concept of operations. 1st Division and the more experienced artillery units are going to deploy in the center and engage the initial column in an open field battle. 2nd Division's newer troops plus 3rd Infantry are going to engage the reinforcements that come from the north, and specifically the units in 2nd Division that I'm bringing here. 8th Infantry has percussion muskets. 6th and 4th both have the 1855 Springfield musket. And then the unit that's going with them over there is 12-pound howitzer with the horse artillery perk. In the center, I'm deploying 1st Division plus those elements of 2nd Division armed with the 1841s because they have superior long-range accuracy by an extra 20% at their longest possible range. And the general plan is to smash into these troops here in the open and shock them at range so that they don't engage. I'm then going to grab 2 of the supply wagons, but not 3. This is a risky strategy, but I was struggling to get a full board clear on this map. So I was able to successfully get the wagons, and then I would, fight it out one way or the other, whether you retreated into the top left of the screen or whether you aggressively attacked the enemy, and I might be able to get 66% casualties to the Union. But I ran into the issue repeatedly that I didn't have enough time to kill everything. And this is a campaign where if you're not careful, snowballing can occur very dangerously. So I was really kind of intent on getting this right. And what we do here was we start shifting 5th and 7th Infantry northward a wee bit with the intent that ultimately I'm going to rotate my entire line kind of in a clockwise fashion. And then the elements that are currently forming in the center of the field there are actually going to become the bottom of my line. Meanwhile, all of this that's happening in the north is intended to take the troops that appear on the northern edge of the map, the Union soldiers there, and force them right to the top right corner. Mostly because I acknowledge that on Legendary, their rate of recovery is going to be too high for me to accomplish the sort of chain route effect that I was able to pull off in Major General, and that I have seen, occur at lesser difficulties. Additionally, as a function, a negative one, of my training force start, I've noticed that the Confederate Army is struggling to keep its soldiers equipped. So as a boon, we're able to generate new units with majors leading them that have stars. That's great. That's fantastic. But I'm beginning to run into the issue where I don't have enough guns, or if I do have guns, they're too expensive to buy to equip my army. And as a consequence of that, I have noticed that there is a concomitant drop in lethality from my soldiers. So they're perfectly well equipped, or perfectly well trained, but they're running into issues with equipment, and I'm running into issues with money. And I'm nervous about expanding the army out for Shiloh because I wonder if we're going to be able to get the full 24 units that we would normally want to take into Shiloh. Let's talk about the composition of this force to the north. So the Northern Task Force, composed of 3rd, 8th, 4th, and 6th Infantry. They're all armed with weapons that have a prioritization of high rate of fire, or as being particularly effective up close. Why? In every permutation of this battle that I've played, I have not been able to get the Union out of the copse of woods to the right here that looks kind of like a big pizza wedge. I haven't been able to get them kicked out of that block of woods. So, given the huge artillery units here, given the 3 or 4 cav units that are popping up, I need to find a way to successfully trade against those units. And the intention for this force is one that can continuously keep the momentum up, can engage at point-blank range, and trade effectively with the Union forces here. I have plenty of 1842s because I picked them up at First Bull Run. I've got plenty of rebores because I picked them up at First Bull Run. What I don't have enough of are rifles. And so this is the particular use case, this forest fighting situation, where smoothbore armed units may actually pull ahead, predominantly because the high rate of fire and the high lethality at close ranges places them in a position to trade effectively against the Union cavalry and against Poe and the 2 batteries, Elder and Martin, in the woods there. So there's essentially 2 different task forces that are fighting here, and 1 floater unit. So you've got Task Force North, composed of smoothbore units designed entirely for point-blank close-range fighting in the woods, and for destroying this task force to the north, this Union task force under Gregg to the north. And then you have Task Force Middle, Task Force South, take your pick, composed of all my rifle-armed units. These are units that are intended, at least in this particular battle, to duke it out at maximum range, to maximize the kills and minimize their losses, and to block and engage the task force under McDowell. I'm aggressively moving 1st and 2nd Infantry here into the wood line in order to give me a solid, covered, protected, accurate base of fire. Now, there's a reason I'm leading this effort with 1st and 2nd Infantry. These are my most experienced units. These are my best troops, the ones I can rely on. And at the moment, I'm backing them up with 4th. And the screen of Dragoons, whether they're mine or the AIs, the Allied units, Jones and so forth. The screen of Dragoons intended to make sure that I'm not outflanked. The floater unit is... So the artillery package for Task Force North is the 12-pound howitzer horse artillery. The artillery package for Task Force South is the long-range focused 3-inch ordnance unit. And the floating artillery package is 1st Napoleon, initially in the north to destabilize their efforts up there, and then cause the chain route, and then now being reallocated to Task Force South and ended to check the advances, the inevitable continuous string of charges coming from McDowell's task force. And that's essentially how the opening phase of the battle plays. What eventually happens is that 5th and 7th become the weak link in my line. So they're the extreme left flank of my arm line, correct? And 5th and 7th are both new units who have good accuracy because it's just the baseline Confederate training stat, and they're using accurate weapons in the 1841. But they're still fighting units that are twice their size, and the AI seems to just be fine. Just totally fine, taking the kinds of casualties it needs to on the way in. So I have to constantly play this game of cat and mouse with 5th and 7th. And I'm aggressive here because they can get shots on Hunt, the battery to the south. But ultimately I play pretty conservatively with 5th and 7th, and they still get mauled pretty heavily in this battle. And it's just because they're exposed. It's because they're on the flanks, and because they're deployed in a way that Franklin and Sherman and Wilcox and all the other units are going to keep on wanting to charge. So we get into this kind of swirling melee here in the north, with 8th Infantry leading the charge, and they have the percussion musket. And then Jones was a big, not Jones, the larger of the two allied cav units. They're there, and now I'm trying to refuse my flank. And the mission here is to essentially clear them out of these woods and say, this is mine, you can't have. Burnside here proves to be a continuous thorn in my side, and I think it's because enough of him is in the woods that he gets the cover, or at least part of it. So these point-blank canister volleys coming from 1st Artillery, the Napoleon Battery, aren't effective enough to eject him from the woods. Or alternatively, hey, there's 2,000 of him. He just might not care. you know? He just might not care. Anyway, we're barely able to successfully pin the Union Northern Task Force in the woods. And we're now in a weird place where actually the extreme close range nature of my task force is actually a disadvantage, because we're able to deliver fires that keep them chain routed, and if they ever try and close, we wreck them. But they're struggling to kind of damage them at long range. That said, Burnside just can't handle continuous Napoleon fire. We have a situation here developing with Sherman. I'm able to cancel the first charge, but there's going to be more where that one comes from. And usually you can cancel the charge pretty successfully when they are the only unit that's facing you. But what happens here is one of the units ends up charging through Sherman to get to me. And that's an interesting situation because I can't deliver accurate fires on that unit while it's charging. So there's this very interesting kind of I don't know how to deal with it scenario that starts to develop. Yeah, so we're starting to see kind of the devolution of my left, while at the same time we're also starting to see my center and my right. The devolution of my right. Yeah, here's Wilcox coming in, and there's 2 of these guys. I'm just not able to retreat fast enough to cancel the charge reliably, and the 3-inchers are a good counter battery unit, but they're not really intended for canister work. They have okay reload stats and okay firepower, but they struggle to deliver the kind of canisters that will shatter a charge on the way in. And it's an interesting dilemma. So I don't really catch kind of what happens to 4th Infantry here. I see them routing. I don't really know what's causing it. Interesting thing happens here with Wilcox. 7th kind of retreats far enough that it sort of changes its target, kind of. And so it decides to shoot at 2nd Artillery, but I'm successfully able to kind of body block with 5th And I give 4th a second to kind of recover itself, and I get them back into it. One of the benefits of these insane Confederate stats, thanks to my training training start, is they've got a good morale, and they're just kind of like, they'll just get right back into it. But you know, we're still trying to figure out how we check their advances to the south, because I feel like 1st and 2nd Infantry are a sufficient anchor point upon which both wings, we'll call them, of the army can maneuver. The issue is a significant portion of my strength is currently tied up in the Confederate left, and not enough of my strength is tied up on the Confederate right. The problem is, from the Union's perspective, is that the exact opposite deployment is true for them. I'm destroying significant portions of their army on the Union right. Okay, that's great. That's fine. That's exciting. That's good stuff. But and their center doesn't really have a successful axis of advance, so that's all good for me. The problem, such as it is that they're just going to keep on charging. The AI has, I think, very successfully determined that I'm weak in this part of my line. And they're not wrong. I totally am. So what I'm doing to try and counter that at the moment is I'm detaching a significant all of my light units to flank. And the issue is that no one of these light units can really hit hard enough to significantly slow down Wilcox or Sherman or Franklin or any of these other units. But the hope, the desperate hope, is that 4 of them operating in tandem can prevent them from charging. As I'm actually confident I can outshoot these units, because they're coming at me in this weird situation where they've got, like, if both versions of Wilcox, Franklin, Sherman, and the other unit down there in the bottom, if they all fought me on a wider front, I would be forced to refuse my flank and give ground. And they just keep coming at me in columns of 2, like 2 wide, X deep, and so aside from the constant issue of cycle charging, which I don't really have a great answer for, and the fact that 5th and 7th would be therefore continuously engaged while their units would have a chance to rest up, we're in cover, they're in the open. I've got artillery at close range to support, they don't. We have 1841s, I presume they have smoothbores or who knows what. The point I'm trying to make is that I'm confident I can outshoot them in a straight-on fight. But, they keep charging, and there's so many of them, and all these other things. However, all of their forces are basically committed to this central attack. There's a very aggressive, vicious push up the middle. It's very cool, honestly, to see how aggressive the AI is in this instance. But it means that once Task Force North has a chance to dispatch the forces here in the corner and rest, they're going to be able to significantly destabilize. They're going to be able to hit the Union flank, and hard. Now, at the same time, this particular battle is really rough on 5th and 7th in particular. The casualties for me are actually pretty light everywhere else. 5th and 7th take the brunt of the losses. Everywhere else, it's like, you know I've been in a fight, but I'm not, like, all that worse off for it, I guess you could say. And these light units are having the desired effect. They are applying the negative morale penalties associated with flank fire just reliably and continuously. And even though each individual volley isn't really hitting all that hard, it's enough. It's enough to check the advance, for now anyway. And so now I start kind of thinking about trying to wheel with 2nd and 1st and 4th. And having them start trying to collapse the Union flank, because they basically have this column in the middle of the field, attacking 2 columns wide, or sorry, 2 divisions wide. Sorry, 2 brigades wide. I mean, look at fucking Porter just standing there patiently waiting his turn. How long can I keep that up? Yeah, I can outshoot each individual brigade, fine, but eventually they're going to wear me down, right? So I've got to do something to destabilize the situation in the favor of the Confederates. I'm not really sure yet what that is, short of attacking with 4th, 2nd, and 1st, which is what I end up doing. And then we have to let the units that were associated with Task Force North take a rest. So that's going to be 3, 6, and 4. No, 3, 6, and 8. They all need to rest. Yeah. So here's Porter. Just he's waited patiently, not engaging at all, and I've been engaging the whole time. So that's fun. Fortunately, we cancel the charge, but now I have 2,200 guys right in front of me, staring me down. Fun. Yeah, like it's a really interesting kind of damned if I do, damned if I don't situation. And, you know, one of the big takeaways from this particular battle is that this ain't your daddy's ultimate general. This is not Major General. This isn't Brigadier General. And I don't know how much of this is tied to the 1.25 mod and how much of this is tied to Legendary. I'm sure there's parts of that I can blame for both. But I'm very pointedly not grabbing the extra supply wagon. I'm really looking for a board clear here. My number one objective in a campaign like this is to control the AI's numbers as much as possible. My number one goal is to make sure the AI never has a chance to snowball. And that's kind of a thing you got to keep in the back of your mind. So I know I've been giving kind of a blow-by-blow as I play, and now, fortunately, the situation has kind of stabilized where I can take a discussion and talk about the meta campaign. Every time I do one of these videos, I try and have a discussion about the meta campaign. So I also can't assume that if you're watching this series, you've watched any of my other series. Series? What is the plural of series? So the way that the AI reinforcement pool works, to a lot of players, it seems kind of frustrating when they go and they get a full clear at Antietam or something, and then the next day, the Union or Confederate Army is, you know, back to normal. Like nothing ever happened. It's really frustrating to go and fight this war and then get to the end game screen and realize you've killed several 100,000, you know, Confederate soldiers when and over the course of the entirety of the war, there were, if I'm not mistaken, approximately 1 million soldiers in gray uniform, and I think a net of 2 mil over the course of the entire war in the Union. Now, those numbers were not contiguous all at once. They were over the course of a 4 or 5 year conflict, and you know, represent attritional losses for woundies, attritional losses for folks who just got out of their enlistment and decided that was that. And kind of all that stuff. So back into the battle really quick. We've got them in a really good place now because they're still trying to attack north, but we have access to their soft flank. And the units that have access to their flank are fresh. They're armed with the best guns I've got in my my corps, which is Harper's Ferries, and they've got good accuracy stats. We've also got rifle access to their only artillery unit. And because we're attacking them from both flanks, we've got them sort of but not quite encircled, and their brigades don't quite know where to attack because they want to attack in every direction. But you'll notice this battle is particularly rough on my officers. I lose a lot of good officers, mostly wounded, but a couple killed. And that's frustrating. But, you know, it is what it is. But we've got them kind of on the back foot. The momentum has shifted in my favor. And we can't see the approximate unit numbers, but it's probably closer to even now than it was earlier. So it's frustrating for a player to kill 3 times the number of soldiers that died in the course of the whole Civil War on one side, and then, just the numbers get kind of crazy. And I don't know the exact math on how it works, but basically there's floors associated with the force pool. They're going to get a certain number of reinforcements, and there's like a random table about the quality of those reinforcements. And they're going to be rookies, or they're going to be crack units, or they're going to be, you get what I'm getting at, right? There's a weird force org pool, and you don't know what exactly is going to feed into it at the end of each battle. It's designed to keep the game interesting. So you can destroy the enemy, but you'll never completely destroy the enemy, because when this game was still being developed and in the beta phase, or in early green light, it would be possible to get the Union or the Confederate armies so strongly degraded that you'd get to like Fredericksburg, which was at the time the last battle in the campaign. You'd get to Fredericksburg and you'd have brigades of 1,600 or something, and the AI Union would have like 300 men, in their brigades, and it's just not fun. It's just not fun at that point in time. So I know it pulls a lot of folks out of the historical roleplay. I know it pulls folks out of the, the sense of vaguely fighting a historical conflict. But it's also it's a game. It's a game first. It's a close, it's a loose historical simulation second. It's a game first, right? However, the AI gets those reinforcement rolls, no matter what. So every time you go to a side battle, at the end of it, the AI gets a reinforcement roll. And those act as some sort of multiplier to the force pool that they get in the next battle. And I think that it probably ends up being like, probably the way that it would end up working out is, let's say that the Union, let's say I've got Shiloh coming up, right? So the Union's always going to have, okay, I'm pulling these numbers out of my ass, so I'm making this up as I go. Let's say the Union's always going to have 25,000 at Shiloh, no matter what you do. If you go in with one brigade and your general and a supply wagon, they're going to have 25,000. And there's scaling that kind of the game grows or shrinks to you in order to make sure that the units you're fighting are relatively interesting or unique, because honestly, with all the different systems in place, a 1-to-1 fight would just be boring as hell. Because you're optimizing your perk choices, you're optimizing your weapon choices, you're optimizing whole divisions structured to fight together, whereas the AI is kind of just, it's randomly getting perks, it's randomly getting weapons, it's random. The point I'm trying to make is, like, you need these numbers to be so stupidly stacked against you to make this game interesting, that you need to be able to go into a 3-to-1 fight knowing you're going to be like, yeah, that's fine. So like I said, 25,000 at Shiloh, regardless of what you bring. Let's not even talk about scaling right now, because I just don't want to, that's two different systems that affect enemy numbers. The next part that I think affects what they're going to bring is the force pool. So when you have that camp screen in between the maps and you get those messages, the letters and stuff from the enemy generals, or alternatively like intelligence reports from your own spies, that say like, oh, General, I noticed that you got a reinforcement of 21,522 raw recruits, or elite troops from a different theater or whatever, right? That's the reinforcement. And then let's say that the Union Army is 65,000 men or whatever, right? If that number gets to certain sizes, it acts as either a positive or negative debuff modifier to that base number, I think. So again, 25,000, and if you've successfully gotten a complete board wipe on every single battle up until that point, 25,000 probably looks more like 21,000 before scaling. If you have let the enemy numbers kind of go uncontrolled, they might look more like 27,000, 29,000 before scaling. And then scaling comes into the equation too. So if you're bringing brigades of 1,000 men or whatever, they'll be fairly small. But if you're bringing brigades of 3,000 men, woo, it gets real quick. By way of an example, I for funsies am playing a legendary campaign, Union side, and in my little dumb bullshit funsie game, I used the reload exploit to get my units double size. Well, you get to keep one of those units. So in that instance, in my funsie game, I named all my units after the Space Marine Legions in the order that they got formed. So the first unit in my army roster was the Dark Angels, and they were 3,600 men going into the battle at Distress Call. Well, what that meant is that the AI scaled to me to make that battle interesting, using an average of my unit sizes that were currently available. So I had 3,600 men in one unit, I had 1,800 in another, left over from the tutorial battle, and then I had 2 units that I created fresh, and they were both 1,200. What do you think happened? The AI had like 2,400 man brigades, and my brand new Union infantry units using shit Springfield 42s and Springfield 55s and whatever. Man, I may as well have been like using strong language to try and fight the Confederates with. So scaling is also a factor, because I went and I reloaded that battle, and I broke the Dark Angels, and then I reformed them as a unit at 1,200, just like everybody else. And that had the additive effect of putting some good stats into my recruit pool that made... So I ended up like deleting the Dark Angels, reforming them, and then reforming a bunch of the other units too. And it actually ended up kind of pushing all the stats up. But when I went back again, and every unit there was 1,200, the Confederates were a much more manageable, like between 1,400 and 1,800, give or take. And that's honestly okay. That's honestly fine at Distress Call. It's still rough because Union stats are so garbage. And especially early on, they really struggle in terms of the access to the guns they have. That battle was still tough, but it was much more bearable when they were this size. Let's, I guess, go back to the battle on the screen, though, shall we? So my objective here is to get a board clear. My objective when I play Stay Alert is to get a board clear. Because Shiloh's a bitch, man. Shiloh is a bitch. Shiloh is, like, I think it's the skill check. It's the skill check boss. So if anybody who's watching this channel has ever raided in World of Warcraft or any other game, there's like 2 kinds of bosses that just basically work as a check. There's a gear check boss and the skill check boss. Gear check boss is basically, do you have enough stats to get past this boss? This is a traditional patches style boss where the boss just stands there and you rail on it, and then like, do you kill it before the enrage timer? That's it, right? And then there's the skill check boss. The skill check boss doesn't actually have that many hit points. The fight's not all that difficult in terms of like damage dealt or hit points dealt. And the boss doesn't actually hit that hard, but the boss has a lot of abilities and might instant kill the tank or instant kill a healer, and then there goes the entire raid. Especially if like the DPS just can't figure things out and they're standing in the fire. And it's all about coordination. How skilled at coordinating is your group? So Shiloh, I think, is the skill check boss for the Confederates. It's not a gear check thing. You don't actually have to outfight the Union Army. You have to outmaneuver the Union Army. You have to bypass, where necessary, certain defensive portions of the battlefield and get to Philadelphia Landing before they have a chance to reinforce it. Or alternatively, shatter enough of their units that whatever defensive force does exist at that landing isn't enough to fight you off. So with that in mind, I'm trying to do 2 things in this battle. 1, kill as many of the Union as possible, ideally all of them. 2, grow the experience of my army without suffering crippling losses, so that the army can maneuver. And explicitly here, I want them to be able to march. They need to march quickly. I have to be able to get the initiative, seize the initiative, and maintain the initiative going into Shiloh. I need to be able to get my army mobile. This is one of the battles where I think mobility, Shiloh, for the Confederates is far, far, far more important than lethality. Lethality matters, and I'm noticing that in this battle. I struggled with this mission because my army didn't have enough lethality. We didn't have enough 1841s, is basically what it boils down to. Or, I mean, we have enough of the armor, I just can't afford them. And our artillery package is fine, but on the middle to low end in terms of quality. So I'm willing to accept a certain amount of casualties in order to force the encirclement and destroy the Union force here. And that's basically what we end up doing. Is 6th Infantry and the other forest fighting units are actually being positioned to check the Union as they retreat into the back corner of the map. And we're going to forest fight some. Ultimately, I decided it's actually better to let them just march right past me. So my initial goal was to check them and then have them kind of grind against my army and then die that way. And then I think where we end up rolling actually is I let them just march past the army getting shot the entire time, and eventually units just shatter. And so that works out too. We're getting kills, we're getting experience, we're increasing efficiency, we're increasing stamina, we're increasing firearms, melee, all these important stats that are going to make Shiloh that much easier. We're also, this is the other part of getting the full board clear, we're also getting rifles off of fallen Union soldiers. And in the case of Jones and Davis, we're getting carbines, Cook and Brother carbines off of them as well. Because I've got a cav unit somewhere around here, 1st Dragoon, that I would like to ultimately arm with Cook and Brother carbines, but I don't have them yet. I don't have enough, and I can't afford buying them yet. So, again, I'm playing aggressively because I need these weapons off the Union. In the same way that I need those supply wagons off the Union. I need their money, I need their supplies, I need their weapons, I probably need their pants and shoes and ration packs as well. And I need my units to get experienced. So all of that factors into my thought process with the coming battle. And I'm a little nervous while I'm playing because here they are in the woods. This is going to be a bitch for them to kind of dig them out. But I realize they're just continuously pushing. They're not really stopping to fight. They're just continuously running. And so if I can use Jones and Davis and other Jones to keep on kind of harassing them at their rear, they'll continue routing. And then what I can do is I can pre-position 3rd and 8th Infantry and maybe even 5th and 7th over in a position where they can maximize some kills and wipe out these units. What I also do is I remount 1st Dragoon, and I'm going to run them over and camp them right next to the 3rd supply wagon, because we've passed the trigger point where this battle would end, and all that's keeping me in the fight is the fact that I haven't captured the 3rd supply wagon. So big thanks to Panic Route for pointing out that if I don't capture the 3rd supply wagon, I get an extra hour and a half of fighting time. And because of the fact that they've added an additional 30% modifier on top of all the time that you have to fight these battles because the game moves slower, that hour and a half looks more like probably an hour and 45 or 2 hours. And I'm going to post up the Dragoons because I don't know when exactly that time triggers. So if I get to this battle and let's say there's just 12 guys on the field, I suffer a draw. And that's just as bad as not killing everything, because then I'm down on rep, and I'm down on money, and I'm down on a bunch of other things. So we ride this out. I get all my kills. I keep on going until they're down. 8th Infantry with the smoothbore muskets is actually able to do plenty of good kill work. They actually have a good day. 8th Infantry has a pretty excellent day. For a brand new unit with smoothbore muskets, they have a pretty great day. But yeah, this is Ambush Convoy. Yeah, I think if I was starting this series over again, which I'm not going to do, I would probably do a different stat allocation. So this is a warning to anybody watching the series after the fact, especially if they're playing in the 1.25 mod. I would probably play with a different stat allocation than Training 4, because the novelty of generating 1-star units with majors is nice. It's not going to replace being able to arm those units. effectively. And maybe I'll be able to do that, later on as I continue to develop the army and continue to develop the econ stat and the recon stat, or the logistics stat, and maybe even politics, so I can kind of catch up on money. We'll see. All of those things are going to come together to mean that I'll catch up eventually, but maybe I might struggle more in the opener than I would normally struggle. So I don't know. It's just kind of a thought you got to keep in the back of your mind, right? I'd probably go with more econ for sure, because I would be fine going into this battle. I'm convinced it would go differently if every single unit here had an 1841, or something similar, to that. So what I wait to do here is I wait till there's only one unit left, and I think it ends up being Wilcox. I wait till there's only one unit left, and then I capture the supply wagon, because as much as I want a full board clear, I don't think the extra, 500 guys are going to be what does me in and ruins my campaign. So I figure, let's play it safe. You don't really know when this battle actually ends. Let's go ahead and grab them. So the the Confederates suffer a little over 3,100 casualties. Almost all of them are in 5th and 7th, who pay just exorbitantly for this battle. Everybody else does pretty okay. We get a bunch of promotions, and that's good, but we lose 2 light colonels, and we, gain some stuff. We get more Springfield 1855s, which I'm not super excited about because I don't like that gun. We recover a couple of Cook & Brothers, but not enough to make a unit. We recover some really interesting things. Enfields in surprising number. Just weird stuff. So like the legendary army is getting good weapons, which means I'm going to get good weapons. We go through here, and the army got beat up a bit, but not to the point where I can't recover. So that's something to keep in mind. Nice thought. Now we can bring a max of 18 units to the battlefield. So we're 1 AO point away from where we'd like to be. However, we might have the slots. I wonder if we're going to be able to actually afford to bring units that can use all of those weapons. So that's a thought for the camp screen after Stay Alert, obviously. But we'll get back to that in the next video. And until then, this is Fiasco. I hope you guys had a good one. Thought I'd try and keep this short. A side note, we have a great bench of officers. So as soon as we get done with Shiloh, we're going to have a crap load of officers, which is going to be fantastic. However, we're probably also going to take a lot of officer casualties to Shiloh. So, I guess we'll have to keep that in mind. Anywho, this is Fiasco, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Signing out.